Hello there and welcome to Primetime News here on TV1. You're joining me, Debbie Paldano, and our sign interpreter for today, Brian De Cruz, who is in fact joining us via Zoom tonight. Now, before we head into your stories in more detail, let's first take a look at your headlines tonight. SLPP MPs request Basil Rajapaksa to enter Parliament. Heated debate in Parliament over COVID-19 discussion. 60 port employees tested positive for COVID-19. Operations halted. GMOA questions the lack of PCR tests. Now on to one of your headline making stories tonight. A group of MPs of the Sri Lanka Podujana Peramuna have made a written request to the national organizer of the SLPP, Basil Rajapaksa, requesting him to enter Parliament. The written request has been presented with the signatures of 19 MPs.
The letter signed by 19 MPs states that it is paramount for Basil Rajapaksa to enter Parliament to uplift the country's economy and to provide the SLPP's active contribution to Sri Lanka. The letter states it was Basil Rajapaksa who created the political party which managed to secure victory at the local government election, presidential election and the general election in a short span of 4 years. These MPs further state it is impossible to think of a Sri Lanka Podujana Peramuna without Basil Rajapaksa. The letter was signed by Sampath Athukorala, Major Pradeep Udugoda, Angajan Ramanathan, Kadar Mastan, Dr. Upul Galapati, Ashok Priyantha, Sanjeeva Edirimanna, Sahan Pradeep Vitana, Akila Salia Ellavala, Nalaka Bandara Kotegoda, Amarakirti Athukorala, Wasanta Yapa Bandara, W.D. Veerasinghe, H. Nandasena, Kumarasiri Ratnayaka, Major Sudarshana Denipitiya, Rajika Vikramasinghe, Nipuna Ranawaka and Kapila Athukorala. One SLPP MP said the letter was handed over to Basil Rajapaksa.
Several Sri Lanka Podujana Peramuna politicians are calling on its founder Basil Rajapaksa to enter Parliament.
The chairman of all district coordination committees met with Basil Rajapaksa yesterday. They invited Basil Rajapaksa to become a member of parliament. The founder of the Sri Lanka Podujana Peramuna party that produced a president and a government with a two-thirds majority is not in parliament. That is just one aspect. It was Basil Rajapaksa who stood as a pillar of strength behind the activities of the party and its success at previous elections. The Good Governance government literally tried to wipe him out. He was imprisoned for 8 months. It was during this period that they formed the Sri Lanka Podujana Peramuna. He hasn't looted a single cent from the state coffers. This is why the opposition is afraid of Basil Rajapaksa. It would be correct to dub Basil Rajapaksa as a walking computer. He is a skilled administrator who is very knowledgeable. If a person in the caliber of Basil Rajapaksa enters parliament, we will be able to execute several activities. In such an instance, we will receive the required strength to steer the country in the right direction. There is a massive calling for Basil Rajapaksa to enter parliament. That is because there is a demand for him to uplift the country's economy amidst the COVID-19 pandemic and to take it to the next level. However, he has not declared his intentions to enter parliament. An adjournment debate took place in Parliament today over the steps taken by the government to combat COVID-19. The motion for the debate was proposed by opposition parliamentarian Nalin Bandara. Before importing the rapid test kits must be approved by the National Medicines Regulatory Authority. However, just 2 days after the closing date for the tender lapsed, these rapid test kits have already been brought down to the country. This is a punishable offence. The government must take the responsibility for the antigen kits that have been imported and take legal action against the matter. This scandal is taking place in several sectors. We learned recently that drones have been set up to monitor areas and police officers have been given cameras. Such equipment has already been given through political patronage. We hope to reveal this matter in the near future. The ruling party has given more consideration to their friends and allies, and they paved the way for them to earn profits rather than focusing on curbing the COVID-19 pandemic.
රජය අද මේ කොවිඩ් අර්බුදයට දීලා තියෙන අවදානමට වඩා අවධානයක් දීලා තියෙනවා තමන්ගේ ගජමිතුරු කල්ලි වලට හම්බ කරන්න දෙන්න. මේ අවුරුද්දේ අප්‍රේල් මාසේ ඉඳලා අපි
Since April this year, we have made requests to import the rapid antigen test kits, but the government never listened to us. But all of a sudden in October, these kits were brought down. On the 28th, tenders were called. The tenders were closed on the 2nd. There was only one working day in between. 32 parties, including the two said entities, had shown interest. By the 5th, these kits were already imported to the country. Never in history has a tender and procurement process been so fast. If everything was so fast as this, COVID-19 could have been eradicated from this country. So what's the reason for this? Now with regard to these two entities, SD Biosensor Incorporated and Dinansa Private Limited. The other is Abbott Diagnostics, George Stewart's.
SD Biosensor කවුද දිනාසා ප්‍රයිවට් ලිමිටඩ් අනිත් එක Abbott Diagnostics George Stewart's මේක කොරියාවේ ප්‍රොඩක්ට් එක මේ සමාගම් දෙකම මේ එකම සමාගමේ එකක් අනිත් එකේ සබ්සිඩියර් එකක් විතරයි.
This is a product from Korea. On the 22nd, registration at NMR took place. The issue date is also on the 22nd. Approval was also granted on the same date. The other entity had submitted its registration documents on the 29th and approval was granted on the same day. All of this was done without a clinical trial.
පාටම එළියට දැම්මේ. තමුන්නාසගේ මේ ඔය වාචල කටට දුන්නා. බොරු පට්ටපල් බොරු කිය.
We heard MP Rajda's story many times. He has been lying all around. You came to power by lying. You looted from the Ministry of Health as much as possible. We will not allow anyone to waste public funds as he did. Stop lying. We will not tolerate you misleading us.
මම වගකීමෙන් කියන. පට්ටපල් බොරු කියනද වාඩිනවලු. මේ ජොන්ස්ටන් ඇමතිතුමා තමයි මේ වර්තමාන අගමැතිවරයාව ඝාතනය කරන්නේ LTT මිනිමරුවන් ගෙනායි වවුනියා.
ලෝක සෞඛ්‍ය සංවිධානය මගින් මේ රෝගය හඳුනා ගැනීම සඳහා තියෙන ප්‍රධාන
The World Health Organization has approved two testing methods for the COVID-19 virus under emergency testing method. One of the PCR test and the other is the rapid antigen test. The rapid antigen test is manufactured by two companies and they are Abbott Diagnostics and SD Biosensor Incorporated. George Stewart is the local representative to both companies in Sri Lanka. We have approved their registration in the proper manner, following the proper procedures. However, at the time of registration, we clearly instructed them to refrain from using the kits until the proper guidelines are issued. The opposition did not know what a test kit was. They thought it was a medical drug. This is why I brought two test kits to Parliament today to show all of you. This is a rapid antigen test kit. This is not something you consume. This kit is plastic.
නෙමෙයි මේක පාවිච්චි කරන එකක් නෙමෙයි මේකේ ප්ලාස්ටික් කෑල්ලක් තියෙන්නේ මේක ඇඟ ඇතුළට දාගන්න එපා.
ගරු රාජ්‍ය අමාත්‍යතුමා අපි දන්නවා උගත් අමාත්‍යතුමෙක් ඒ වගේම උපාධිය පිළිබඳ ප්‍රශ්න මේ දවස්වල මාධ්‍ය කතා කරනවා. ඒක නෙමෙයි. දැන් මේ WHO එකයි එතකොට මේ මුට්ටි අතෑරීමයි අතර තියෙන සම්බන්ධතාවය මොකක්ද කියලා මම අහන්න කැමතියි.
එතුමා මගේ උපාධිය ගැන පශ්චාත් උපාධිය ගැන අභියෝග කරන්නේ එතුමාගේ තියෙන ඒවා ගැන මම අමුතුවෙන් අභියෝග කරන්න යන්නේ නැහැ.
මේක නෙමෙයි ඔබතුමාගේ පැණිය ගැන කියන්න ඕන.
ඔබතුමා අර ගෙදර පෙරපු කසිප්පු ගැන කියන්න බැයිද? ඒක ගැන කිව්වොත් එහෙම මම පැණි ගැන කියලා දෙන්නම් ඔබතුමා.
ගරු කතානායකතුමනි
Sri Lanka's tally of COVID-19 infections had increased by 11,000 within a month. What is the government's work plan to combat this virus? The army commander had objected towards lifting the restrictions in the western province. However, Ambuldenia had kept stores open since mobile bakery vendors were not seen in the area. What is happening? The government is using the COVID-19 pandemic to fulfill two ulterior motives. The first is to suppress their political enemies. The second is to allow their allies to earn profits while breaching the law. The people are dying of COVID-19 on the streets. This is not Wuhan, but Panudura, Undugampola and Gampaha. The government is bringing absurd arguments to counter these facts.
නොකර මෙන්න මෙතන නිකන් මේ ගොන් තර්ක දානවා. ඒ ඔච්චර ජනතාවට ආදරෙන් කතා කරනවා ඔබතුමා තාම ගියාද බදුල්ලට? කොරෝනා ඇදිලා තා එක දවසක් බදුල්ලට ආවේ නෑ. පිම්බුවට බඩ ගෙම්බගෙන හැඩ. ඒ නිසා ඔයගේ ගෙම්බොන්ට මම උත්තර දෙන්නේ නෑ. මේ ඇන්ටිජන් ප්‍රශ්නේ විතරක් නෙමෙයි කරු කතානායකතුමනි.
The antigen test kits are not the only products mired in problems. There is a company that is hiding stocks of sugar amounting to 50,000 metric tons. The owner of the company is a close ally of the government.
ගජමිතුරෙක් සර්ගේ මේ වගේ හරක් නිසා සර් ෆේල් කියලා කරු කතානායකතුමනි. අන්න මිරිස් කුඩ්ඩා ගා ගන්නවා. අන්න පුවක්කාරයා ගා ගන්නවා. අන්න වැලිවරා ගා ගන්නවා. ගහනවා. කසිපුවරා ගහනවා. අනේ වියතුන්. අනේ 69 ලක්ෂර ජය වේවා.
මේගොල්ලෝ හරි ආසයි මිනිස්සුන්ට මිනිස්සු මැරෙනවා නම් ආර්ථිකය විනාශ වෙනවා නම්.
They are eager to see people dying in the country, the economy collapsing and all businesses being closed down. The opposition is claiming that Gotabaya has failed. I wish to clearly say that following the war, it was people like Kirialla who conceded that it was Gotabaya Rajapaksa who managed to win a 3-decade war for the country. We will bear responsibility for the situation surrounding the COVID-19 pandemic. We will eliminate COVID-19 from the country.
අපි කොවිඩ් එක මේ රටේ නැති කරනවා කියන එක පැහැදිලිව කියනවා.
ජෝර්ජ් ස්ටුවර්ට් අවුරුදු 150ක් පරණ කම්පැනියක්ලු. දැන් ඒකේ අයිතිකාරයා දිලිත් ජයවීර මහත්තයාලු. කොහොමද අවුරුදු 50ක් වයස දිලිත් ජයවීර මහත්තයා?
They're saying that George Stewart is a 150-year-old company and that Dilit Jayavira is its founder. How can 50-year-old Dilit Jayavira become the founder of that company? We wish to question him about his source of income. He is asking us not to tell lies and sling mud at him. It was his channel that aired a story saying that a serpent had emerged in the Kalania River and that a holy man had jumped into the river and trapped the snake in a Coca-Cola bottle. It was Derana TV that fabricated the story. Now he is asking us not to sling mud at him. The health minister is engaging in occult practices upon the advice of Dr. White. This parliament has the people in the likes of Sudarshi Fernandapille, who is a qualified MBBS doctor, and Professor Jayasumana. However, the minister is following the advice of Dr. White. He is saying that he had lived in the Himalayas, but we know that he was from Jambu Gasmulla. He had given the health minister a pot of holy water to be thrown into the river. I wish to ask her as to why she is conducting herself irresponsibly. She threw the pot into the river on the 1st of November. On the 30th of October, there were 10,424 COVID-19 patients and 20 deaths. On the 12th of November, there were 15,628 patients and 48 deaths. The number of deaths had increased from 20 to 48 after throwing the pot in the river. A netball player had died after consuming drugs given by the person who advised to do this. These bogus doctors are being given recognition by the government. I wish to question the health minister about the trust she placed on the pot of water.
ඔබතුමීගේ දන්න විශ්වාසය මොකද්ද? අනිත් එක කට වහලා මුට්ටිය ගන්න.
රජයක් විදිහට මේ COVID-19 රෝගය මර්ධනය කරන්න කටයුතු කරගෙන.
As the government, we are taking steps to combat COVID-19. Today, we are not detecting patients from the Minuangoda cluster. We had a suspicion as to whether the individuals associated to the Minuangoda factory had come into contact with individuals at the Paliagoda fish market. Therefore, we carried out tests at the fish market. We then identified large numbers of patients. The threat posed by this cluster continues to exist. We do not deny that. Hospitals do not refuse the admission of individuals infected by COVID-19. Between 500 and 600 patients are being admitted to hospitals daily. It is the government's duty to bring the COVID-19 pandemic under control without causing the country to collapse. If people have certain beliefs, we have to take part in those rituals, as this is a country that is blessed with spiritual power. Therefore, I am requesting the opposition to join us in fulfilling this national responsibility. Let us join hands to protect the lives of the people.
ඒ නිසා මම විපක්ෂයේ නිතාම ගෞරවයෙන් ඉල්ලා හිටිනවා අපි කවුරුත් එකට එකතු වෙලා අපේ ජාතික වගකීම ඉටු කරමු. අපි සියලු දෙනා මේ මව්බිමේ ඉන්න ජනතාව මේ ව්‍යසනයෙන් බේරා ගැනීමට ඒකාවන්ව කටයුතු කරමු කියන යෝජනාව ඉදිරිපත් කරමින් මම නිහඬ වෙනවා.
Keeping up with more headline-making stories, the Colombo Port Authority said that 60 employees at the port have tested positive for the virus, while another 200 have been directed to quarantine.
Trade unions say that several cargo vessels are at the Colombo port as operations at the facility have been delayed. However, the port chairman said that steps would be taken to minimize the delays in unloading consignments from vessels. The management of the port has attributed the delay to the COVID-19 pandemic that has been several of its workers in the Colombo and Gampaha districts been infected or subjected to quarantine. Internal port records show that nearly 38 container vessels are facing delays in entering the Colombo port. Yesterday's parliamentary sitting saw views being expressed on the operations at the Colombo port that have been hampered at present.
අද වෙනකොට මේ රටේ ආර්ථික
Operations at the Colombo port, that is an economic hub in the country, has been halted. Around 40 container vessels that were scheduled to reach the Colombo port during the last 4 weeks have been moved towards India's southern port. There are 42,000 containers at the Colombo port. The Katharina transit container ship that is transporting essential items including onions and potatoes was due to arrive in the country. However, the vessel had docked at India's southern port after being unable to enter our harbour. 25 vessels have been anchored at the outer harbour as the unloading process at the Colombo port has been disrupted.
බඩු ටික අද කොළඹ වරායට බාගන්න බැරුව. ඒ වන විට කොළඹ වරායේ
11 crane operators at the Colombo port have been infected with COVID-19.
මේ වන විට කොවිඩ් වසන් කොවිඩ් රෝගය වැළඳිලා තියෙනවා. මම ඉතා වගකීමෙන් කියන්නේ
I wish to responsibly state that 25 ships are docked at the outer harbour as they are unable to enter the port. Go and inspect the location. I state this with responsibility.
හවුට් හාබර් එකේ නාව 25ක් තියෙනවා. මේ වරාය පිළිබඳව ගැටලුවක්.
If the activities of the port are disrupted, large container vessels transporting essential items will not arrive in the country. The people are facing difficulties in finding food and water. There is another story to this involving close allies of the government at the port. Just as the government has allies to import sugar and antigen test kits, they have their henchmen at the port as well. Therefore, we request the government to immediately intervene into this problem. Otherwise, we wish to caution that the government would have failed in its duty over this matter as well.
එහෙම නැත්නම් මේ වැඩේනොත් ෆේල් වෙන්න යන්නේ කියන එක අපි අනුතරංග වීමක් කරනවා. පෙරට පැමිණෙන නෞකාව.
Since there is traffic at the port due to the delay in carrying out operations, the ministry has decided to establish a special task force and a 24-hour operation centre at the port through the Sri Lanka Ports Authority. The country is an economic hub. We can uplift the country's economy only by fulfilling our responsibilities properly. Therefore, we cannot dampen the process. We hope to carry out the operations of the Ports Authority without any disruptions in future. We invite private shipping companies to join our efforts as well.
විවෘතව පවතින මෙහෙයුම් මධ්‍යස්ථානයක් මේ වරාය පරිශ්‍රය තුල ස්ථාපිත කරන්න.
උදාහරණයක් ගත්තොත්
Cargo vessels that had docked at the Jaya terminal this morning should ideally leave the port this evening. However, this would be delayed by at least 2 or 3 days since operations have slowed down. There are several vessels docked at the outer harbour that are awaiting entry to the port. These vessels need to reach the other port through the Panama and Suez canals as scheduled. Therefore, they will not remain at the Colombo port for a long time. If they are not granted entry, they will skip our port and head towards other destinations. This is a serious matter. We must understand that our country is in a precautious situation due to this problem.
රටක් විදියට ගත්තොත් එහෙම අපි තාමත්ම අවදානම් තත්ත්වයක ඉන්නේ කියන එක අපි තේරුම් ගන්න ඕනේ.
The delay in port-related operations can be observed in foreign ports and are not limited to our country. That is a normal phenomenon. However, we experience certain problems due to these delays. We are on the process of addressing them. Around 40 of our employees have been infected by COVID-19 while approximately 200 are undergoing quarantine. The other employees are continuing to report to work. We have divided them into batches since their services are required around the clock.
පැය 24 වැඩ කරන නිසා කොටස් කීපයකට කඩලා තමයි වැඩ කරන්නේ. ඒ අනුව කටයුතු කරගෙන යනවා.
175 COVID-19 cases have been reported from prisons which accommodate more than 32,000 inmates across the island. The highest number of COVID-19 cases has been reported from the Valikada prison. According to Commissioner of Prisons Administration Chandaneka Nayaka, among those infected are 22 men and 89 women. COVID-19 cases were also reported from the Colombo, Bogambara, Matara, Kuruvita and Busa prisons. All inmates who tested positive for the virus have been directed to treatment centers in Kantakadu, Gallala and Valikanda. Taking into account the prevailing situation in the country, a committee chaired by Commissioner of Prisons Administration Chandaneka Nayaka has been established to curb the spread of the virus within prison premises. The committee will also include the Prisons Commissioner of the Supplies Division, an Assistant Superintendent and a Head Jailer. Meanwhile, the Prisons Department has instructed prison officers at the Valikada prison in Colombo to remain in isolation at their homes for 2 weeks.
The COVID-19 virus is spreading in prisons. Around 8 or 9 inmates have been placed in a 8 by 10 foot prison cell similar to sardines packed in a tin. Senior prison officials are acting hilariously in the face of this country without resolving this problem. The prison's Commissioner General is only treating inmates such as a former parliamentarian, a serving parliamentarian and a chairman of a Pradesha Sabha as human beings. They have been moved to the restroom of prison officers as the virus is spreading among inmates. Several female inmates at the Valikada prison have been infected. More than 100 prisoners have contracted the virus. Do the officials hope to resolve this problem by allowing them to die?
මේ කොරෝනා වැළඳිලා දිනවා. මේගොල්ලන්ටත් මේ මරණයද පිළිතුර කියලා අහනවා අපි.
අධිකරණයට ගෙන
We have reduced the number of prisoners being produced in courts while minimizing their transfers as well. We have set up video conferencing technology at prisons to participate in court proceedings. Inmates infected with COVID-19 were first identified on the 28th of October. When the virus was detected in the community on the 4th of October, we restricted visitors from entering prisons. However, the virus had entered the prison while spreading in the country. Therefore, we have adapted the relevant security measures in prisons.
එක්ක බන්ධනාගාරවලට ඇතුල් වෙලා තියෙනවා. ඒ නිසා බන්ධනාගාර තුලේ අවශ්‍ය කරන ආරක්ෂිත පියවරවල අපි අරගෙන තියෙනවා.
5 COVID-19 deaths are reported in Sri Lanka today. This was confirmed by Director General of Health Services Dr. Asela Gunawardena. As at 7:10 this evening, another 378 COVID-19 patients had recovered. According to the Epidemiology Unit of the Ministry of Health, the number of total recoveries reached 11,031. The total number of confirmed COVID-19 cases reported from Sri Lanka reached 15,921 today. 4,837 patients are currently under medical supervision. With the increase in COVID-19 cases in the country, the Government Medical Officers Association points out that the government should increase the number of PCR tests carried out.
අපි දන්න තරමේ මුල් ඒරියාවේ මැෂින් එක අලුත් වැඩියා කළා දැන් සතියක් විතර වෙනවා.
As far as we know, it has been a week since the PCR machine at the Mullaeriyawa base hospital has been repaired. However, only a little more than 10,000 PCR tests have been carried out yesterday. We have carried out more than 10,000 PCR tests within 24 hours without the PCR machine at the Mullaeriyawa hospital. On some days, we have done more than 20,000 tests. We urge the health authorities to look into this matter, as we expect the number of PCR tests performed daily to exceed 12,000 and reach 15,000. We depend on PCR testing to estimate the prevailing risk. So if the authorities can only carry out 10,200 tests even after fixing the machine at the Mullaeriyawa base hospital, we need to question where did it go wrong. This needs to be explained by the Health Ministry and its Epidemiology Unit.
වසංගත රෝග විද්‍යාංශය ඇතුළු මේ බලධාරීන් විසින් පැහැදිලි කළ යුතුයි කියලා අපි විශ්වාස කරනවා.
The Sri Lanka Army Medical Corps worked closely with health services in the fight against COVID-19. The commander of the Sri Lankan Army and the head of the National Operations Centre for the Prevention of COVID-19 Outbreak, Lieutenant General Shavendra Silva, expressed his views in this regard at a ceremony today.
වූහාන් ප්‍රදේශයෙන් පැමිණි ශ්‍රී ලාංකිකයන්ව රැකබලා ගැනීමට ඉදිරිපත් වුණේ ශ්‍රී ලංකා යුද හමුදාය වෛද්‍ය බලකාය.
It was the medical corps of the Sri Lanka Army that came forward to look after the Sri Lankans who returned from Wuhan. The medical corps of the army together with the medical corps of the Tri-Forces have managed operations at the quarantine centres. More than 45,000 Sri Lankans have returned from overseas. 3,102 patients from the Minuwangoda cluster and 6,120 patients from the fish market have been reported so far. When there was a shortage of hospitals to treat these patients, the Sri Lanka Army and the Tri-Forces, including the Medical Corps, came forward to upgrade and support our country's health services.
විශාල සේවයක් අපගේ වෛද්‍ය බලකායෙන් කරනු ලබනවා.
Views were also expressed about future actions that will be taken concerning isolated areas.
කෙසේ වෙතත් ඉදිරි දින තුන තුලදී
We found many patients from these isolated areas. However, a further decision regarding isolated areas will be made after analysing the situation during the next 2 days.
කිරීමට අපිට හැකියාවක් තිබෙනවා ඒ සමැදිවත් ක්‍රියා කිරීමට ඉදිරි දින දෙක තුලදී අපි කටයුතු කරන්න ලබනවා.
Sri Lanka Air Force drones and helicopters were deployed today to monitor movement in areas that are currently isolated amidst the surge in COVID-19 cases. 7 people were arrested for violating quarantine laws following aerial surveillance above Mutwal, which is currently in lockdown. The operation was carried out by the police Special Task Force and the Air Force.
ගුවනේ සිට ලබා දෙන පණිවිඩ අනුව
Based on data collected through drone footage, a special surveillance team will be deployed immediately to arrest the suspects using grid numbers. This special surveillance team includes officers from the Police Special Task Force. The purpose of this operation is to find those who are violating the quarantine laws. Therefore, we request the residents in isolated areas to remain indoors and completely limit any form of movement.
කිසිම ආකාරයක සංචාරණයක් සිදු කරන්නට එපා. ඊයේ දිනේදී අපි ආරම්භ කරු වහාම අපගේ ඩ්‍රෝන යන්ත්‍ර
As soon as we initiated this special regiment yesterday, our drones were deployed to assist the police for the missions with the COVID-19 outbreak. In the future, we are expecting to add some technologically advanced drones to our drone fleet. Some drones can detect body temperature. Also, some can be used for announcing purposes.
ඒ වගේම ගුවනෙන් අපිට යම් කිසි දෙයක් අපිට announce කරන්න පුළුවන් හැකියාවක් තිබෙන drone යන්ත්‍ර අපේ ගාව තිබෙනවා.
Meanwhile, during a media briefing held today, journalists raised questions about the current economic situation of the country and its foreign debt obligations.
We know it's going to be a tough year, but at the same time, it's going to be a year where if you plan carefully and then you make sure that your overall basis in which you are going to settle your debts is effective, we can make ends meet. You see, one of the key criteria on which Sri Lanka's debt burden ballooned in the last 5 years was one, because the rupee depreciated unduly. As a result of the rupee depreciation alone, 1,772 billion rupees was added to our debt of about 13 trillion rupees. The second was because of the interest rates hike. The interest rates were unduly allowed to increase, and as a result, the overall interest burden that the country had to bear was also increased by as much as 1,430 billion rupees. We are immediately controlling these aspects very carefully. We are also conscious of the amount of foreign debt to the local debt ratio. So there was a little bit of a skewment. It was skewed towards the foreign debt, and that put an additional burden on Sri Lanka because we had to service the foreign debt with after buying foreign currency. We'll have to make sure that our total foreign debt is clawed back to more manageable numbers, and our intention is to have a 40% foreign debt and 60% local debt in the near term, moving towards that as quickly as possible, and then over the longer term to have 33% only as foreign debt and 67% as local debt.
Meanwhile, convening a media briefing, conveyor of the Movement to Protect People's Rights, Asela Sampath, expressed the following views. The 5,000 rupee allowance is enough to pay for 3 meals. This is the situation we are currently facing. Whatever said or done, Mahinda Rajapaksa during his 10-year government, even by lying, managed his administration well. But the decisions taken by the present ruling party has inconvenienced the general public. People have been severely inconvenienced. Daily wage laborers have no income to live. They are struggling to make ends meet. While the people struggle, the politicians who are supposed to talk about the problems faced by the people are scolding each other in profanity. I first urge them to discipline all politicians. Residents and farmers of Madhavachya are experiencing several problems due to a rock quarry that is operating in the Mahadibul Baba wet zone. The acting divisional secretary of the Madhavachya said that the operations at the quarry would be halted in compliance with a written order issued by the irrigation department.
This is the Mahadiul River in Madhavachya. This river nourishes approximately 300 acres of land and supports the local communities whose livelihood revolves around farming. The locals claim that the river is facing a huge risk due to a stone quarry adjacent to the river. Locals also claim that operations at the stone quarry, which operated some time ago, was suspended amidst protests from the local communities. They claim that the stone quarry had resumed its operations with the support of political influence. The Mahadiul River nourishes another 4 rivers which are also at risk due to the stone quarrying taking place. Locals urge the authorities to cancel the license of those involved in quarrying operations immediately. Newsfirst inquired about this matter from the divisional secretary in Madhavachya.
Permission has been granted for the quarry operations about 10 months ago. I discussed this matter with the Geological Survey and Mines Bureau, and they said that since a legal license has been issued, suspending the operations will be an issue. This river comes under the purview of the Padavia Irrigation Department. They had informed the Geological Survey and Mines Bureau that this quarry is located near the river at a sensitive area, and therefore quarrying might block the waterway. The recommendation provided by the Irrigation Department to the Geological Survey and Mines Bureau is sufficient to put a stop to the operations taking place at the quarry.
ඒ හේතු මං හිතන්නේ ප්‍රමාණවත් වෙනවා.
The COVID-19 pandemic, coupled with the unpredictability in consumer demands, has rendered the humble shipping container as a hot commodity.
Being the backbone for trade and commerce for over half a century, shipping containers are haunting one of the world's most important shipping lanes, the Trans-Pacific route. As a result, the cost of shipping containers has increased by a whopping 50%. Shipping charges all across the world in general and the Trans-Pacific route in particular are increasing too as a direct consequence. One of the chief factors behind this is a surge in Chinese exports along with robust consumer demand in the United States. The situation is so dire that some vessels are leaving Asia without full loads because there is not enough equipment that can be found. According to reports, the shipping industry is experiencing the strongest increase in 40-foot demand following one of the strongest decreases in demand ever. European and American ports have been experiencing a high surplus of empty containers. At the same time, Asian ports face severe shortages.
The Korean embassy has drawn parallels between Sri Lanka's Asia-centric foreign policy and the southern policy of Korea on the eve of completing 43 years of diplomatic ties. Issuing a statement, Korean ambassador to Sri Lanka, Santosh Woonjin, said that Sri Lanka's foreign policy is designed to foresee and grasp the opportunities of a changing world. The statement points out that the public and private sectors of both countries are seeking to improve several key sectors, including agriculture, renewable energy, infrastructure, LNG, digital economy and healthcare. Accordingly, it insisted that strengthening public and private partnership would further consolidate strong bilateral ties between the two nations. The embassy cited around 23,000 Sri Lankan migrant workers in Korea act as great assets to strengthen economic and commercial ties of both countries. It also said that Korea has been assisting Sri Lanka in its battle against COVID-19 by strengthening its cooperation to uplift public health in the country. Ambassador Woon Jin said he expects more Korean companies and tourists to arrive in Sri Lanka to seek business opportunities and to visit the Indian Ocean island. Dialogue Axiata PLC has gifted a fully functional 10-bed intensive care unit to the Homagama Base Hospital.
This initiative aims to reduce the stress of medical staff members treating patients at the hospital and to improve the health services system on a district level by adding special value to the training of physicians.
The first step. Excuse me, at what time will the class begin?
It should start by 3:30 in the afternoon.
පන්තිය කීයටද පටන් ගන්නෙ?
අද හවස 3:30 වෙද්දී පටන් ගන්න ඕනේ.
එතனை மணிக்கு வகுப்பு தொடங்கும்?
இன்று மாலை 3:30 அளவில் ஆரம்பமாக வேண்டும்.
The first step.
And with that, we wrap up primetime news here on TV1. For more news, log on to our award-winning website, that is www.newsfirst.lk, or stay tuned to our 3 social media platforms. We would like to thank Brian De Cruz for joining us tonight as our sign interpreter via Zoom. For the Newsfirst team, I'm David Paldano. But before we leave you tonight, we leave you with an important message to remember. Good night, stay safe.
Listen to this speech by world-renowned film director Oliver Stone. It is heavy with deep meaning. It is full of honesty and reflects what many people are thinking, and is a reminder to foreign representatives in Sri Lanka that their actions are being measured by the people, both their own citizens and ours. It is time that all of us voice our feelings even in the smallest way, so it will gather momentum.
Not to remind you, especially you younger writers, that you can be critical of your government and your society. You don't have to fit in. It's fashionable now to take shots at Republicans and Trump and all that, and avoid the Obamas and Clintons. But remember this, in the 13 wars we've started over the last 30 years, and the $14 trillion we've spent, and the hundreds of thousands of lives that have perished from this earth, remember that it wasn't one leader, but a system. both Republican and Democrat. And call it what you will, the military-industrial, security, money, media, complex. It's a system that has been perpetuated under the guise that these are just wars, justifiable in the name of our flag that flies so proudly over our lives. Our country has become more prosperous for many, but in the name of that wealth, we cannot justify our system as a center for the world's values when we continue to create such war and chaos in the world. Thank you. No need to go through the victims, but we know we've intervened in more than 100 countries with invasions, regime change, economic chaos, or hybrid war, soft power, whatever you want to call it. It's war of some kind. In the end, it has become a system leading to the death of this planet and the extinction of us all. I fought these people who practice war most of my life. It's a tiny game, and with all the criticism and the insults that you'll receive, and the flattery too, it's important to remember, if you believe in what you're saying and you can stay the course, you can make a difference. I urge you to find a way to remain alone with yourself. Listen to your silences, not always in a writer's room. Try to find not what the crowd wants so that you can be successful, but try instead to find the true inner meaning of your life here on earth. And never give up on your heart in your struggle for peace, decency, and telling the truth.